Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Board Education Workshop and Board Business on April 16th. Would everyone please follow with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now may we please have a motion to move out of executive session?
So moved.
I'm sorry, that was Jan, and a second?
Saf.
Saf, thanks so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And I don't believe there are any alterations to the agenda. So with that, we'll move right into the board business portion of the agenda, and it begins with the second reading of the school calendar. And Carm, if you could speak to that, please.
You bet. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the second reading, so this is the final reading, we'll send out, if the board approves tonight, we will send this out to our community, I think very early tomorrow morning. There is one minor change to this. It is we inserted the testing dates for 4th and 8th grade science next year, correct, Cindy?
Yes.
Yes, so we put those in there. It happens next spring of 21. But other than that, we have, again, this is different than your typical school calendar because we are starting with kids before Labor Day. All right, so that week, because Labor Day is the latest it can possibly be. And so we will have 2 days of classes with kids before Labor Day. Our teachers will also have 2 days as well before Labor Day, which is typical. And then we'll have a nice long weekend for Labor Day weekend. We'll start, obviously, the Tuesday after Labor Day. School will just will continue. So, yeah. So that's it. That's our calendar. No real changes other than adding 4 and 8 science testing in the spring.
Okay, and then briefly, I know Carmen, Linda, and I spoke about developing our board calendar, and we will plug in business meetings and workshop meetings just as we normally would, but hold off on deciding topics because we obviously want to address what we haven't been able to address this year and then think about next year, because knowing that things won't follow the normal course of business. So
Right. Great.
That's also on everybody's radar.
Yep. So we need a motion.
Yep, so with that, can we have a motion to accept the second reading?
So moved.
Maria? Second. Sue? Okay, thank you. And the next item is...
Yes.
All in favor.
Sorry, all in favor.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to the second order of business, we're accepting a donation. And Ryan Freeman is going to speak to that.
Yep. We received a donation from the Edward and Alice Johnson Foundation last month. If you recall, this foundation has been extremely generous to the district.
Yes.
Over the years. This check was for $6,000. So the board needs to act on it because it's over our threshold. They also donated last year around the same time as well, if you remember. And really they're honoring the work that the OT, PT, and adaptive PE staff are doing at Willink. So we already have accounts set up for them based off of last year's donation. So we will just add this donation check and give the staff their access to be able to draw on those funds for additional equipment that they would need to enhance the program.
Any comments? Okay,
Generous, very generous.
Yeah, it
very,
is.
very generous. We are very extremely grateful. And Cindy, I know that we'll have a thank you letter on
Yes.
the board. Thank you. Okay. And if there aren't any other questions or feedback, can we have a motion, please, to accept this donation?
I'll make that motion.
Accept.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah,
take your
Mike,
pick.
and a second by Linda.
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. We are extremely grateful for
very grateful.
members of our community that continue to look out for the needs of students and act so generously. The third item on board business agenda is the treasurer's report. Again, Brian, if you would speak to that.
Sure, I just want to, given how topical it is right now with the economics around us, on the first page of the treasurer's report, I just want to call your attention to 2 line items for revenue that as we go over the next couple of months to kind of take a look at, if you wanted to hone in on something financially to see what the impact would be of the last month and possibly the next upcoming months are doing to the district. I would look at sales tax because that is a sales tax payment that we received in February, which would have been for the prior quarter. So when we get to about June, when we receive the first quarter of the 2020 year, just as a comparison, take a look. We have some projections, but I think that's one area that would be helpful for the Board of Education if you wanted to look at a treasurer's report in a couple of months. Usually it's on a lag based on when we receive the check. Take a look at that if you want to see some impact on our revenue, the differences between those two. And then the other area would be aquatic center income. I just wanted to point out if you wanted to take a look at there with the aquatic center closed out and events not being held, to see the impact there as well. So there's just 2 areas I want to point out if you wanted to look at and hone in on and really look at over the next couple of months to see what this is doing from a revenue standpoint.
Brian, what are you thinking the sales tax impact is going to be?
I think it will be
Down.
second sales tax. Second quarter would be the highest impact. I think the first quarter is mostly is January, February, and half of March. And that half of March, I think you're going to see actually sales tax tick up because people were stocking up on stuff. So you might not see it entirely until the next quarter of sales tax. So it's just something to watch for and be interested to see what really happens there. Because anecdotally, I mean, perfect example. I think that Friday, Saturday, when people started to worry about things shutting down, I don't think it was unheard of for somebody to go spend $1,000 at BJ's when they normally spend $150. So there's, I don't think we'd see it immediately. I think it's going to be a drawn-out process.
Don't forget, didn't the governor waive filing and submitting sales tax receipts for small businesses?
I'd have to double check. I'm not exactly sure.
He postponed that.
Yeah, it did.
I thought they were still due because when the timing of it was due for a previous quarter. So most small businesses would have had it collected already and be holding on to it.
Oh.
But I haven't dug into that from the small business perspective.
Any other questions or discussion around the treasurer's report?
No.
Everyone okay? Then can we have a motion, please, to accept the treasurer's report with recommendations to review sales tax and the aquatic center income in coming months?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Sue. Second?
Second. Maria.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to old business. Sue, there is so much policy here.
I know.
You must be barely able to contain yourself.
I know. I haven't been able to work on it. My team is just not a.
Everything is a challenge. So I'll
So,
let you walk us through
right.
all of these policy changes. Thank you.
Okay, we had, I think there was, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 policies that we looked at. They were the first reads at our last meeting. There wasn't any questions with any of the changes. So if we want, we can just go to the second read and, I think we can vote on them all at once if you'd like. There not a lot of substantial changes really around language, changes in language, just to make sure that our policy reflects reality. Some language changes recommended by our attorneys. We actually are eliminating a policy. It's no longer required. And then we just simplified the graduation requirements policy so that it wasn't changing all of the time. And so moving the specifics to regulation. So I think we can vote on all of these at once. Can't we?
It's just really verbiage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, and I believe we did this for the first reading as well.
Right.
If there are no comments or discussion around the second reading of any of these policy updates, can we have a motion, please, to accept the second reading of all 8 policies?
Motion to accept second reading?
Thank you, Mike. Second
Second.
by Jan.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
So
you very much.
I just want to thank you all for indulging me in my passion for policy.
It's necessary. It's great.
Necessary and great. Yeah, you
Yes.
obviously not do all the fanfare that we would like to be able to share with you, but we appreciate all the work that you do.
Thanks.
And moving on to the consent agenda. Everyone has had the opportunity to review all the items within. Any questions or feedback? Are we okay?
No questions.
None.
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you. Having said that, can we please have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Maria,
Second, Mike.
second by Mike, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to the budget workshop portion of the evening, we open with comments from Linda.
I'm up. So
You're up.
before we start this, 6 weeks ago, before this craziness started, I had written some comments, and so I had to go back and change them a little because I think things have changed a little in our thought processes. So under normal circumstances, the development of a school's operating budget is an arduous process. When you throw a pandemic into it, this process becomes even more complicated. 8 weeks ago, social distancing, flattening the curve, distant learning were phrases none of us truly ever understood. Today, we are all very much aware of them, and we are living a life we've never imagined. Making sure school lunches are delivered, trying to figure out how to keep in touch with students, and worrying about the mental health and well-being of both students and staff has become our #1 priority. But at this point, even though the budget process and timeline are still unclear, we need to move forward. It is vital that we work to plan for the return to normalcy, whatever that normal will look like. Our students and staff depend on us, so we must prepare a budget that is aligned with our goals, one that is both educationally and fiscally sound. Tonight is our second school budget workshop. Brian Freeman is going to go over where we are this year in our budget, as the governor has made a few changes and implemented the look-back period for fiscal monitoring, and this could directly impact our current budget. After focus on 2021, with so much uncertainty, it's certainly reassuring that we have a strong leadership team who always puts the needs of our students first. Okay, Brian, take it away.
All right.
Thank you,
Cindy-
Linda.
Cindy, are you ready for me to share screen?
Yeah, I stopped my sharing, so go
All right.
ahead.
Uh-oh. Can anybody hear anybody?
Yeah,
Yes, I can hear you, Sue.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I can hear.
I wasn't hearing anything for a second. It was silent.
Hold on one second. There we go. Everybody can see that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. All right, so let's hop right into the budget workshop. Thank you for delaying this too, by the way. It's really helped bring some stuff into light by having a few extra weeks with everything that's going on. So our agenda for this evening is just really going to meat and potatoes is go dive right into the state budget, the impact, what we think is going to happen, and then focus in on our instructional program because that's the one area we have not reviewed yet as part of this budget season. So right now, we're not even to the fiscal year 2020-21 yet, and we're running into some challenges from the governor. So right off the bat, we know he has 4 look-back periods for fiscal monitoring that Linda alluded to. The first of which is this month of April 1 to April 30th, and then May 1 of this year to June 30th, the next chunk of time. And then the last 2 are into the next fiscal year. It's July 1 to December 31st, so a half of a fiscal year of 2020. And then the January 1 to March 31st. Why doesn't it go to July 1? Why doesn't it cover 2 fiscal years? Because that is the end of the state fiscal year is March 31st. So it really just covers part of our next budget year. So the first huge question mark is well, the first 2 lookbacks for aid reductions are actually in the 1920 fiscal year. And I don't think we've gotten a solid answer yet. Are those going to impact our 1920 numbers? Or is that going to be kicked into 2021 numbers? There's still some questions around that of what's going to happen. Because the state still owes us $8 million in aid payments due that we get in May, in June. The largest comes at the end of June. So, you know, that's still hanging out there. So there is a chance that they could not pay us the full aid for this year. So it's something we really want to look at and anxious about after this first look back period. Okay. And then obviously the next 2, the huge one is half a year of the 2021 period. So what can we do to prepare for this? You know, what are some of the things? So I broke it into 2 budget years per se of how we could tackle this. And really 1920, you know, our options are limited due to the timing of it. We're 75% of the way through our school year. We do a majority of our purchasing, non-salary purchasing up front in the first 3 to 6 months of the school year, and get stuff, I mean, for school that we spent last summer already. So we've committed funds long before this date. We're actually wrapping up purchasing. There isn't much to do there. Projects that Buildings and Grounds have done, they've committed money to in funds and started down those roads. We did put a spending freeze on March 13th. We usually do a spending freeze sometime around there in that March area, that March timeframe every year. So that does help a little bit. But we'll if it does come to fruition that the money is going to be taken from this year, we'll look at ongoing projects. We do see some savings on energy, fuel, overtime, similar expense lines because we're not in session right now. So there are some savings that we're experiencing that could help offset any kind of reductions this year. But in 2021, we'll have a better picture of what the first 2 look back periods look like to kind of better address. Things that we could do: immediate freeze on spending, stopping non-essential projects. You know, we've worked as an admin team, created a line item analysis of spending that could be delayed or eliminated in preparation, and look at positions for consolidation and attrition as they become open moving forward as something also that we could address in going into the next budget cycle. So what did the governor's numbers look like for us? First column you see there is our 1920 state aid budget as a reference. That's what we have for this year. This is what we budgeted. And then I put the governor's projection on there for you because as a reference, that's what we talked about in February. And then what did the legislative numbers look like? And then where I think we're actually going to land. And so the first thing off the bat that I'll point out, you'll notice is obviously we lost our $90,000 in foundation aid increase. That was gone right away. All other formulas though, were allowed to run as is. So that was a huge win. The expense-based formulas are allowed to go as is. All the transportation aid formula, the building aid, BOCES aid, were all allowed to go as is. So no changes there, which was great because it gives us better projections. So high cost excess, private excess cost, those are all based on student enrollments. And so taking a look at that, we're going to stay the same as what we thought for this year. We'll see a small increase of $50,000 in the private excess cost, and we could break that down a little bit later in the special education portion. BOCES is a huge jump, a couple different reasons why. One is because we have the capital project with BOCES. So as we pay for that, we get aid back. So we're getting a large chunk of aid next year from the project. And last year, remember when we were presenting, our costs for network had jumped substantially in 1920. So as those costs at BOCES go up, the aid the following year increases. So we got another aid increase there. And then we also had an aid ratio increase slightly. So just the formula itself was giving us more aid. So those three factors are really the reason why such a large jump in BOCES aid for next year, 2020, 2021. The building aid you see is the increase. We talked about that last time. That's a huge increase because it matches what we're doing for debt payments involving the capital project. Transportation, finalize that. That's an increase because of an aid ratio increase. We gained almost 1% on aid ratio increase. And then some of our bus purchases from the previous year, we're getting a little bit more aid off of those as well. So an increase there. Hardware, software, UPK, all relatively staying stable based on enrollment. Okay. And then I'd like to introduce you to two new terms, pandemic adjustment and CARES restoration. It's the new gap elimination adjustment and GEA restoration. So pandemic adjustment, the governor was taking away a little bit more than $750,000 from us, which just matches perfectly what the federal government was giving us for CARES restoration as part of the COVID-19 CARES Act from the federal government. So state, in essence, is intercepting the funds that were meant for districts and just doing a take back. Okay. So all our state aid is a little over $54 million. All of which is coming from expense-based aid increases based on spending we're doing and actions we've taken as a district. Nothing new from the state this year. So just to rehash, foundation aid has been removed. Expense-based formula aids are normal. And the introduction to the pandemic adjustment and CARES restoration. There is some talk that somehow that pandemic adjustment will be utilized for any kind of take backs. So there's some discussion around, is that going to be our ceiling for a take back? Is that a benchmark? So we'll have to pay attention to see what comes of that. So what went right in the budget for us? What are some positives? No consolidation of the aid categories, which was nice. No new building aid tier, which is good. No redesign of the transportation aid formula, which would have adversely affected us. The mandatory paid time off for voting was repealed, in essence, for districts, as long as employees have more than 4 hours from the end of work to the closing of the polls closest to them. It's no longer an issue. The STAR changes that were proposed were not approved. And this one kind of little under the radar. There are going to be competitive grants for student mental health support, with more information to follow on that. No, there wasn't very many specifics around what that would look like and how, when, where, and if we could get access to those funding. Some other items, though, in the budget that are tangential but will have impacts on us directly. The styrofoam ban in effect for January 1, 2022. Schools are not exempt. We have styrofoam trays in the cafeteria. So we'll have to see what kind of impact cost-wise that would have us to move to a different kind of system. So something we've actually had discussions with, exploring a little bit already, but we'll have to escalate those conversations to be ready for that. No new school safety grants. We were hopeful. There was a couple propositions around that, but nothing made it in. CSE placement costs. So the state would pay about 18.5%. That state share was eliminated. Now it's going to districts. So we picked that up. And elimination of the state share of maintenance costs for state operated schools for the blind and deaf. I don't think we'll have any costs associated with that. But we will see some costs associated with those CSE placements. So the big question: when will the budget vote be held? Because that's what we're building towards here. And what's the big answer? Sometime after June 1 is the best we could do right now. I've heard both June 9th and June 23rd as possibilities. That the vote would be somewhere aligned, possibly with the primary vote somehow. I know we have lots of concerns about finding staff to even do a budget vote. Cindy and I have had this conversation. It's hard enough in a normal season to find people to work the budget vote. But given everything that is going on, I think it would be infinitesimally harder to recruit and find enough people to staff it for an all-day event. And with 4,500 people constantly tracing through one area, is that something we want to be doing? So there's a lot of issues coming around. But a couple of recommendations out of this, because we don't know, and like Cindy had alluded to earlier, we don't know everything we work back for. All our dates and times and when forms are due to the state work backwards from that budget vote date. So one of the things that's being recommended is, originally on our calendar, I know we were going to adopt a budget next week, but I'm recommending to the Board of Ed, based on everything, is to move that budget adoption to after April 30th to sometime in May, because of that look back period. We don't know what that's going to look like. We need to be able to adjust to that. That's my early recommendation to the board, is because we don't know, we should probably just delay and move forward with a budget adoption after the April 30th, sometime in early May, to take a look at what that impact does. Any questions so far on any of that?
No, and I know we've all been viewing webinars through the state as they've become available. And the only real answer is that everything is being looked at and talked about. And there's still a lot of awful big decisions that need to be made. Right.
And it's very uncertain of who's going to be the one, and ultimately, is it going to be the governor making that, or is it going to be an SED? There's some also, the latest you push it back to June 2 has some real financial implications, because our next fiscal year starts July 1. So, if the 23rd is our budget vote, that would give you 7 days to do a revote, and if necessary, because I know there are a couple of districts that were looking at breaking the cap. So, that's often not quite successful. So would you be able to turn around a second vote in 7 days? I'm not looking in my screen of Cindy's face right now, but I'm sure it just went white of the possibility to have to turn something around that quickly. So there's a lot of different variables that hopefully everybody is kind of thinking about as we do this.
So,
I think that there's another reason to potentially postpone it. I was on a phone call with Congressman Morelli, as part of the chamber. He indicated Congress is looking at bailing out the states, and New York could potentially get 19 billion. So that might impact the lookbacks if that comes to fruition. Now, I'm not betting on Congress at this point, but that's a possibility. It'd be nice to have some certainty because that could change the look back.
So I have a feeling no matter what comes our way, this this scenario will happen regardless. That the state's just going to intercept it and offset it to close their books. I think they've already set that standard for any kind of federal aid that is coming our way. Will in essence just be intercepted by them.
No, this would be aid directly to the state, and they could spend it any way they want. But if they had a $10 billion gap and they got 19 billion, hopefully they wouldn't cut schools.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. All right. Yeah. I mean,
It's going to be bigger than 10 billion when they start seeing revenues, but we don't know.
right.
So give some certainty to the unknown.
Brian, I also had another question. I am going to bet that it hasn't happened before, but is there any thought to postponing or changing the date of the fiscal year? In other words, if that, does that
Yeah,
provide
that's,
some?
it would take the governor to override that one because that one's also set in law.
Yeah. Any other questions? Want to continue? Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, let's take a look at all of our revenues then proposed for 2021. You see the state aid right there on the second line. But I want to point out sales tax I'm proposing will be flat for next fiscal year for us because, we're projecting 2020-21. And, hopefully as this pandemic ends and we start the economic engine, it won't impact the next fiscal year as greatly as possibly this fiscal year, I think, is where the impact you'd see more than in the next fiscal year. So we've left that flat. Then really all other areas of the revenue generating budget are flat compared to last year, besides the tax levy, which is going, at our cap. But even pilots, nothing substantial coming on the books there. Miscellaneous revenues being held flat because we might lose some revenue this year with rentals and programs that we run through continuing ed, losing some funds and getting refunds over the next the last 2 months of the year. We're projecting to be up and running for next year with all that still happening. I'm an optimistic here when it comes to this. So. But there's some room for for some ups and downs within these budget numbers as well, based on our past history. So everything's really staying flat for 2020-21, besides state aid and the property tax levy, which are the two main drivers of our revenue. They make up practically all of it. So. Any questions on some of these other revenue areas? Okay. All right, so we could get right into the instructional budget, and we'll start with pupil personnel services. What are those areas? That's psychologists, guidance counselors, social workers, CTE programming at the EMCC, Foreman Center, summer school. So here's what the numbers look like, a 2.63% increase. You see the salaries, instructional and non-instructional, going up. That is a lot has to do on the non-instructional side with aides associated here and the minimum wage impact, why that is a little higher. Then you see on our equipment line, a huge 116% increase, but it's really only $3,500. We're actually purchasing, it's one of the few adds to the budget. We're purchasing a couple extra AED machines for Spry. because of the extra space that is coming online with the cafetorium. So that was budgeted for. So as a percentage, it looks like it's ridiculously high, but it really is just two additional AED machines being purchased for Spry because of their square footage increase based on the construction. See a small decrease in supplies. BOCES services, that's just a small increase on the tuition side of sending students to EMCC as well. And then how do we compare with the rest of Monroe 1? We are slightly above the average when it comes to these areas. For guidance, social workers, psychologists, why would we be above average? Because we have 2 high schools, twice as many guidance counselors. Is the number one largest chunk of why we're higher than the other districts on the east side of Monroe County as a comparison. Okay. Any questions on that area of the budget?
Nope.
All right, moving on to some curriculum. Okay, overall, you see a reduction here in the curriculum budget. A lot of that in salaries. Everything else held flat. Why is that happening? Because we've had breakage of retirements and people leaving, replaced with cheaper, newer, less experienced staff members. We've seen that in both areas, both in the non-instruction and on the instructional side. So this budget has gone down almost 1% from last year, holding line items flat from last year as well, and the supplies and the contractuals. And yep, moving forward with slight reduction for next year on the curriculum side. Okay. But even with that reduction, it's going to look like we're still above average in what we spend on professional development and curriculum in comparison to some of our friends on the east side. One of the things I don't like about this is that not everyone uses these codes to report to the state. So some of the information here could be skewed. They could be putting their information in other areas, but it's just easy reference of how we spend our money on professional development and curriculum development. And then to jump into the instructional budget, some updates. This was year 2 of doing a per pupil expenditure on our buildings. They remained the same, but we did a 10% reduction just in preparation for next year, 2021. But that was given to every building to vary. They were allowed that choice of where they would take that from. And you'll see as the numbers play out, everybody pretty much from the most part used their reduction in the same manner. Equipment is the first step in reducing funds. You'll see that. Supplies were largely left intact. Salaries, you see, we did experience some breakage here as well from 18-19, but the non-instructional side, aides, assistants, all being driven by minimum wage, which next year will be interesting to see how that plays out, because it goes to $12.50, which is the cap next year. That was the ceiling for division of budget to then look at. Does it stay at $12.50? Does it go? Does it keep going? Does it go to $15? So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out during the middle of some economic downtimes. BOCES slight increase in program costs here. And textbooks, you just see this trend we've happened in the last couple of years, reduction in textbook funds because of the increased use in digital resources. So how do the numbers look? You see where we are for salaries. Our substitute line staying the same, non-instructional. You see the equipment is the big reduction of 26%. That's the buildings choosing not to take their 10% cut, mostly out of equipment, while maintaining whole supplies, supply numbers. So driving their money towards supplies, driving more money into enrichment and cultural arts. And then the reduction in textbooks, which, you know, has been a trend for the past couple of years. Another reduction there. And then on the contractual side too, you see buildings choosing to move in a different direction with their money as well, and reducing there. So just what encompasses the instructional program? This is, K-12. This is every course you're teaching at the high schools. This is first grade classroom. This is all that, those instructional areas, principles all wrapped into one group. So just to refresh, why are we doing this per pupil? It's really was in response to the ESS, ESSA reporting requirements, and to take a hard look at per building expenditure. So here's what the base amounts were. Every elementary kid gets $175, middle is $185, high school is $225, and then we add some allocations for special education population, ENL programs, free and reduced lunch. So we add extras for buildings that have those programs to help assist there. But this year we did the 10% reduction because of budget strain. And like I said, buildings were determined which lines were reduced. So here's what a 4-year look back looks like of our building budgets of where they've been. You can see the per pupil actually gave the buildings more funds when we did it that way. And then with the 10% take back this year. All right, moving into the library portion, they also do a per pupil, $24 for elementary, $19 for middle, $17 for secondary. This was the first year in a while we were able to keep the costs for the software databases flat heading into next year because we've had some significant increases in those costs over the last couple of years. Also, the 10% reduction in supplies and material also ascertained on the library. So they are still funded well beyond our library aid ratio, though. Just some very small reductions there going forward. Special education is up next. So I just want to point out some changes over the last 4 years of where we're headed with BOCES placements. In 2017-18, we had 58 students in BOCES placement, and that was the year then, the next year, we created the OWL North program in 18-19. Then we also had a significant influx of students that needed special programming. So during this school year, we created the OWL South program. And so projected 2021, I have a question mark there because we're currently working on a new program, a new secondary program, because we've seen an influx there of needs-based. So don't have a name yet, we're still working that out. So I left it as a question mark because it's going to happen, but we still have to work through some of the particulars on this program that is projected to start next year because the projections on the BOCES placements of what we would be sending out would be significantly cost prohibitive. And then the private placements give you a little look back on amount of students that we've had. These are Norman Howard, Helper and Day Treatment, Marion Cariola. You see we've gone up, stayed flat, but then projected for next year a significant jump in those placements, which you'll see spelled out in the budget. Okay.
So I have a question. Is the need at the secondary level because our OWL program students need to move on and we want to keep them in the district, or is it something more than that?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's connected to OWL yet.
Okay.
There's still that gap.
Okay.
It's more connected. We've had some students move into the district.
Okay.
We have students in a program currently at BOCES as well. And when we sat down in February, March, and started looking at the projections of, the BOCES placement projections, working with the special education team, Colleen and Kathy and Marjorie and Andy, we sat there and looked at it like, all right, well, you now have this many kids. It's going to cost us, this amount in tuitions to BOCES. We could do this cheaper in-house. It was that same. It was the same OWL conversation. It's kids that were already there. plus a group that was going out that were like, well, now you got enough to run a program in district, which would be half the price of what we're paying in tuition in BOCES.
And it pays dividends with their sense of community and everything like we've seen in OWL. So great.
Right.
That's a great win for them. So, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So yeah, we did create the OWL South this year. Like we said, looking to expand that secondary level. I've projected some staffing into this budget for that. So I just wanted to, throw some numbers out there for you to give you a frame of reference. So when we were looking in 17-18, the total cost of BOCES, that budget year, 17-18, was $6.35 million. And so we were looking at, okay, how do we stop this from keep going up and up? Because, at the time it wasn't going to stop. So I just quickly ran, all right, what if we kept all these kids here, kept them where they were? Didn't do OWL North, didn't do OWL South. Don't look at this program. This has yet to be named secondary program. Where would our cost be at BOCES from 18-19, 19-20, and then 2021? We'd be around $9 million. And we have not added, $2.7 million worth of new staff to fund the 2 new programs. If we did, I probably would have had a heart attack. It would made it. So we've been able to do this better than what would have ended up happening if we had just gone down the path. All right, yep, all right, it's a BOCES placement. They could take on BOCES placement. So I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes that gets lost in that, and we harp on the cost of special education a lot. But this is one of those things that if it was left to just go, what that budget line item would look for us. And if I fast forward now, so we would, be significantly higher than what I'm projecting now on that BOCES line. It's 5.5, because this new program is in essence going to blunt any kind of cost increases for next year with BOCES. So imagine if instead of having this 5.5 here, we had the 9. And, would not, like, oh yeah, but we've hired new staff. That would come up. I agree. This number up here for instructional salaries would be less, but they're not going to go in unison together. Taking away $4 million here, you're not going to save $4 million here, because it is more cost effective. So you see inside those instructional salaries, there is FTE for this new program next year built into that budget. So that's why you see the percent a little higher. The non-instructional, I probably for the next, I don't know, hopefully not much longer, but I'm assuming for the next 3 to 4 years in my budget presentations, I should put it on voice record, minimum wage impact when it comes to talking about special education aides and teaching assistants. Everything else held relatively flat, but you want to see the tuition impact right there is the $250,000. That is if I go back a couple slides, that correlates directly to this projected private that you see there. So the increase in there, and if you've seen, that has gone up between the 2 years by about 15%. But that's a significant amount of students now in those programs, many of which are, they moved in from out of district that we've seen, which isn't unheard of in a district our size over the last year. And then when we compare to Monroe 1 BOCES still, as a percentage of the budget, I think we are lowest on the Monroe 1 side, because we do make some decisions like this and we do things in-house. We have the capacity to do it. So, this would look much different if we had that BOCES line be closer to where it could possibly have been. So this is one of the areas, I think we're doing it better in-house, and we're doing it more cost effectively. So any questions on that and where we're headed there?
Brian, how many students are we talking about for this potentially new program at the secondary? Do you have an idea?
Colleen can chime in too if she. I believe originally we're somewhere in the 13 to 15 range, if I remember
Oh.
correctly, Colleen.
Right now, we're projected that we would be starting 2 classes and be full at 16.
Wow, okay.
So when you think about that in just ballpark figures, that's $100,000 a kid in tuition at BOCES.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay.
For a reference point.
Yep. Thanks.
Any other questions? I don't want to feel like I'm speed rushing through or I can't see everybody in the dialogue box, so I don't want to miss anything.
We're all good.
Alrighty. Moving on to instructional technology for next year. So we've had some software and network costs have stabilized. I know last year we had an increase there. All of our operating software is purchased through BOCES, so a lot of the stuff that we don't even think about, like Adobe, all those network costs that we saw some almost double-digit percentage increases in that, those have stabilized. The one increase you'll see that we're going to buy through BOCES is some additional cybersecurity protections. We're going to jump into a COSER with the other districts to do some auditing and do some backup of systems, just because it is a never-ending, ongoing threat to the district. So you'll see a cost increase there. Salaries, you'll see some breakage from retirements and turnover in positions. And honestly, I think the one-to-one program right now that we started 5 years ago now has left us in a great position to weather the current challenges. I think without that, without having that, we would have been scrambling a lot more in the past couple of weeks to get educational opportunities to our kids.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So where we look budget-wise, where we are, you see the breakage on the non-instructional side with turnover there and retirements. They also saw a 10% decrease in their supply lines here as well to help offset some costs. And then the $50,000 increase to BOCES, that is what I'm projecting our cost in the cybersecurity COSER will be. Remember, everything costs a little bit more for us because we are the largest chunk when we pay into BOCES. So overall, though, a decrease on the instructional technology budget. Still refreshing all of our equipment every 3 years. So we'll have another group of tech equipment to hand out this summer. One concern, though, is having enough people to do it, because many of you saw I think when we did the one-to-one several years ago and saw how many students that we had to help breaking down cardboard, handing out stuff, getting things out there, getting things ready. Will we be able to group enough people together over the summer to do a lot of this work is something that we're working through with our tech group, with myself, Brian Neenan, Joe Montemero, and Brian Zimmer, of ways we could possibly, work around restrictions throughout the summer. And that also goes for buildings and grounds with the amount of part-time students they hire. And, they cluster together in teams to go out. How could we do that also, still expect the same level of commitment and customer service for our families over the summer, but do it in a safe manner. Those are all conversations we have to have ongoing and adapt to, especially, but tech is one that we're coming up with multiple plans on how we could continue and keep going with everything we have doing with a shortened work staff. I'll give Brian Neenan, if you want to chime in about that at all too, because he's an integral part of that in those conversations.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Brian. Yeah, again, our hats are off to the work that they've been doing here in the last couple of weeks. But it also is a testament to the planning and the forward thinking of the board and forward thinking of our district, as it's just been a blessing, like Brian said to begin with, that we can give our kids the opportunities that we're giving and the teachers have the equipment to be able to do that. Our staff does. And the every third year rotation in the lease is the thing that Brian Freeman brought to us right at the beginning and when he started with us. And that's been brilliant, and it's been something that is sustainable. That's really the model we were going for. So that's what I've had. Thanks, Brian.
All right. And then obviously we are the highest for Monroe 1 in what we spend in technology because we have over 9,000 devices, and nobody in Monroe 1 is going to come close to that with the total amount of devices we purchase. So that would skew. But also this comparison data, when I pull it from the state, I know that District I, all the way on the right-hand side, is a 1-to-1 district as well. They're just putting their expenses someplace else, maybe in a different instructional line. So like I said, when we do these comparisons to see where we're benchmarking budgetarily with some of the other districts, sometimes it's apples to apples, other times it's apples to oranges. So, but you know, not unexpected for the investment the board has made over the last several years in instructional technology that we would be leading the way. All right, athletics and the co-curricular budget. We have an estimate of possible salary increases, not having that finalized, so you'll see that. They also too took a reduction in supply lines like the buildings, and a small increase in contractuals for some PE instruction. Our cost for ice skating as part of the PE curriculum and bowling, small increases there in what we're projecting to be charged. Not too much, but you'll see that there. So proposed budget, overall just a 2.21% increase. See the reduction in supplies, equipment, small increase there, $200. BOCES services, let's see, that's flat. We're part of a large consortium through BOCES for a lot of athletic scheduling and officials and coaching certifications. So that runs through BOCES. That's helpful because that becomes aidable. But you see that staying flat, and then the contractual increase for next year. I think with athletics, you know, we're positioned well for possible additional cost reductions going into next year as an area to look at as well for some of the nice to haves versus necessary things. So that's something we've taken a look at with the two athletic directors as well already for next year. And then we're right kind of in the middle comparison to the other Monroe 1 districts, slightly above the average. But, you know, with two high schools, double the teams, you know, you would think we would be all the way skewed to the side, but we're not. We're doing okay. And then last is the community education recreation budget. Number one, minimum wage, huge impact on our program with lifeguards. Staffing shortages around lifeguards, competing with other employers with stricter requirements is also a concern with the aquatic center. We're hopeful that we'll bounce back and have you know, the same great programs that we've been able to offer come the other side of May 15th, knock on wood. And then really all other items held flat. The big things going on right now budgetarily for Community Ed Rec is the Aquatic Center. All the lights are being upgraded to LED, outdated fixtures. Thomas Pool is getting upgrades as part of the 2018 project. But like I said, the shutdown is impacting revenues for the program the past months. We've been shipping out some refunds to some of our community members that have the month-to-month or yearly memberships for swimming or water aerobics. So we have seen an impact there. And then moving forward, the only increase is their salaries, not instructional. Mostly it's all part-timers and it's all driven by minimum wage. And then we do Our loyal student workers, student lifeguards that come back year after year, we do give them a little bump for coming back for their loyalty and their hard work. Other than that, everything is status quo, bare minimum to be able to operate the 2 pools and the continuing ed program going forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How close are we in our community education budget to breaking even? I mean, I know the income goes into the general fund,
Yep.
but how close are those numbers?
So we're in the black.
We are.
We are. Yep. Yep, we are. We a bulk of that miscellaneous revenue we take in, Sue, is all continuing education funds. It's pool rentals, it's facility rentals, and it more than offsets the cost that we associate with those facilities that we need.
Great, thank you.
So our first budget quote for 2021 is a 3.33% increase, going up to $183,466,408. It's a $5,912,137 increase. A bulk of that increase is actually, if you want to look at it a different way, it's really only about a 2% increase, a little bit more because of the debt service increase. So as we got that more aid, we had the debt to go with it, but that's still a budgetary increase. So if you're looking at just removing that debt increase, it's a 2.8% increase. So we stayed below a 3% budget to budget increase, which given what our benefits did and some of the other cost increases, I thought was pretty good that we were able to do that. But so this is the first blush. This is where we're at. And revenue is matching expenditure, so there is no budget gap to close before we go to adopt. We are there right now, per se. But, you know, we need to get through that first look back period to see what's going to happen. So tonight was workshop number 2. April 23rd, I had originally when we set this up, maybe budget adoption next week, but think about moving that to when the budget hearing is, but maybe, because we really want that date to work back to find the budget hearing date and to find our times for sending out mailers. So June 1 budget vote, possibly. We know for sure June 30th is the last day for a budget vote, and we know July 1 is the start of the fiscal year. So that is really some of the key dates of our remaining budget process, and just waiting for the state to fill us in on the rest of it and what needs to happen. All right, and that concludes workshop number 2. Any questions, anything hanging out there that I maybe didn't address or you'd still like to see more information on?
Anyone have questions, please jump in.
I'm good.
Pretty thorough.
Hey, Brian, great job trying to think through
Yeah.
everything. I just have one question. I don't know how many students in Webster go to private and parochial schools. At 22 million unemployed Americans, some of those have to be in Webster. And if they look at what they can cut cost not paying tuition for a private school and sending them to Webster. I mean, if we had 30, 40, 100 new students coming in the fall, could we absorb that within our budget? And I know the enrollment period's over, but we may be forced to.
All right, so how many total, I know how many we transport off the top of my head. It's about 600 and give or take change of private parochial students we transport. Not all of them have to register with us. So if they don't need transportation, they don't have to technically register with the district. To get the exact number would take a little digging into. I think it's probably about 750 to 800, depending on the year, for the total number. So could we take an influx of 100 or so kids? Generally, we prepare for that every year anyways, because in the summertime, we quite often get close to that kind of fluctuations with kindergarten, people moving, people coming back at middle school. Usually we see the bulk of it, movement at 6th grade and 9th grade from private parochials moving back and forth. So we do have that planned for in a lot of our projections. Maybe not to the amount of 150 kids, but you know, it's in there. It's part of our budget for enrollment adaptations.
So it wouldn't be a big impact.
You know, I think we'd be able to handle anything. But if there was a massive wave like that, is there a possibility? Because we do, I mean, you know, we don't have tons of extra space available in the budget. You know, so if we're looking at 100 elementary kids and enrolling in August that we weren't expecting, I would imagine they wouldn't be in one grade level. It would be sparsed out, and it would be across buildings. So, you know, we could add maybe it would add 1-2 kids per grade level per building. That's not something that's going to move the needle. Just like when we say population's down between 10 years ago and this year, yeah. But when you aggregate it out, it's, you know, 1 to 2 kids per class. You're not going to cut a teacher because it's only, you went from 22 kids to 20 kids. You still need 1 teacher. It's not like all 20 kids left out of that one class. Same concept going the other way, as, you know, kids are coming in, you know, so now it becomes 20 to 21 or 22 to 23. The math works both ways the same way.
Thank you.
Good question.
Now, if they built a housing complex on 250 in Atlantic, like they're proposing, with, you know, that would be the largest complex concentrated in one area, which would send 300 kids into one building and one building alone, then we'd have a different conversation. Because that would skew one side versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Okay.
I'm good.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you,
That was
Brian.
awesome.
Brian,
My pleasure.
this is all your hard work. This is all your vision, your ability to leverage every type of resource that this district has, and we are deeply grateful to you for all your work.
I appreciate it, but, you know, it truly is a good team, you know, to work with from every budget stakeholder that I interact with, and, you know.
And we know things will probably get more challenging before they get easier, but
Yeah.
I think we're positioned as well as we can be, given what we know.
Yeah. That's why I tell myself at 3 in the morning.
Not sleeping.
You can call any of us. We're all awake still.
We're up anyway.
Yeah. Okay. If no one else has any comments, I'd just like to close by saying thank you to the entire One Webster community, our teachers especially, and staff, everyone who's working every single day to do everything possible, including our administration and leadership under Carmen, to make this situation as bearable as it can be. And having said that, we know that it's not bearable for a lot of people. We look forward to when things return to normal, whatever normal is going to look like as well. But we do deeply care about everyone, and we'll get to the other side. So I thank everybody for their efforts. Please all stay well and healthy. And as much as we want to help and do more, staying home is the best help that we can deliver. So having said that, does anybody have anything you want to add? Are we okay? It's good to see everybody on one.
Good to see.
Okay, then with that, can we please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thanks, Maria. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Have a nice weekend, everybody. We'll Zoom
Thank
again.
you.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.